Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you folks doing this evening? So, tonight's going to be a night with topics that were selected by my Facebook friend. I had no say in these actual topics. I only picked what was suggested to me. So, I wanted to thank Jamin, Mike Gillespie, and Trisha Jones for these fantastic topics. And actually, what's very amazing is that these topics can work very well together. Now, tonight, the topics are the Three Gorges Dam, court packing, and the threat of authoritarianism. And when I was actually looking at these topics, the first thing that came to mind was the CCP, or the Chinese Communist Party. Now, the reason why I thought about these things is because of the recent tensions and long-term tensions as well with the Chinese Communist Party with the United States. And also when you think about it in the current sense of tensions. And what I mean by this is that within the last 16 months, we have seen a rise in tensions between the two countries, the People's Republic of China and the United States. And that primarily has to do with the stronger stances that the United States government has had against the PRC. Primarily having to do with the tariffs that President Trump had applied to the trade that was coming in from China, amongst other particular things that have been going on. One of the other ones would be the conflicts in the Southeast China Sea, which has been one that has been going on for quite some time, and the continuing tensions between the PRC and the ROC, also known as Taiwan. So that was very interesting that these three topics were brought up, because these things can work extremely well. So let's see how well I can tie these things together, because there's a lot of content which can be used. And I think the first one we're going to do is probably going to be the Three Gorges Dam. So let's going to go down these lines. Familiar with the Three Gorges Dam. It is a hydroelectric plant, a hydroelectric dam that is located in China, and it is situated on the Yangtze River. Now, it was made to develop a lot of the power required for China. And it's also the largest hydroelectric dam in Asia. I'm not sure if it is the largest one in the world, but I particularly know that it is the largest one in China. And what's so interesting about this particular dam is that it's a relatively new construct. It has only been around for the better half of 20 years. And so it has basically taken the place of notoriety when it comes to dams. Being an American, I'm going to be very biased with this, because the only dam I give a damn about would be the Hoover Dam. And that's a horrible joke, but it's a joke that it kind of makes sense when you think about it, that most people dams they think of the Hoover Dam, not too much the Three Gorges Dam, which is by far the newer one and also the more relevant at this moment. And what do I mean by relevant? Well, particularly we're talking about the fact that the Three Gorges Dam is dealing with structural issues, and serious ones at that. Like, for instance, the People's Republic of China have actually reported that there are significant concerns about the structure actually collapsing upon itself. Now, the big issue with the collapse, if the dam were to capsize, is what would happen to the settlements that are downstream. What's going to happen to them? Well, we're looking at new beachfront property down there at this moment. We're not looking at anything very pretty. If the water were to actually breach the dam, and the dam were to become completely structurally compromised, it would not look very well. In fact, it would probably destroy a good chunk of the infrastructure and industry of China, to the point where it may actually cause irreversible damage and China out of the international picture due to the far-ranging damage that could be incurred by the dam capsizing. Among that, we also have the concept of this actually being recorded, and we have seen data of the dam water level. Right, the water level has been going up incrementally over the last few months, which is a very concerning sign. Now that this could also be the changing of seasons. High water levels and lower water levels can depend on the seasons, on the tides, on many other reasons. But for this particular case, due to the notion of structural issues, seeing a higher level of water in the Three Gorges Dam could indicate may be a bigger problem than what is currently being disclosed by the CCP, because as we know, the CCP has had a history of not being 100% honest about everything that's going on, as a saving of face move versus a political one. That being said, if it were to capsize, it would be devastating nonetheless. But moving on from that, we have to deal with the CCP here in the United States, and so we're going to move on to the second topic, which is going to be the threat of authoritarianism. All right. Now, what does the CCP have to do with authoritarianism? Well, it has to do with their influence on international establishments, and as well as local ones, national ones. China is not just in China. China is everywhere. In fact, they have very strong influence on the UN and the WHO, which is a part of the UN. And they've also have control or influence on members of the major media here in the United States, in Europe, Africa, other parts of Asia. They have basically taken a foothold anywhere they possibly can get a foothold in order to grab some type of control. Now, the issue with this is that there are people in power that is using that influence to influence their own policies. Let's take my home state, right? New Jersey is obviously a state here in the United States, and our governor has been on record of being a Maoist. That is the allegations that are alleged. I cannot confirm that personally. I can only say that through secondhand sources. So, if it is completely accurate, that is for me to be completely verified. Though I have heard it from multiple people and multiple different times. So, what does that mean? Well, that means we're going to be dealing with a non-American-based policy making. Now, that sounds like a bunch of garble, but please humor me when I try to explain this. Earlier this year, and even into 2019, the State Department, run by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, compiled a list of governors who may be considered either hardlined, ambiguous, or leaning towards the CCP. And this had to do with who would actually be sympathetic to China, who would be hardlined against them, and who is relatively unknown. Of those states that were considered willing to be, considering to be siding with the CCP rather than hardlined against, would be places like California, New York, and New Jersey. And by the way policies are done, and by the way we're seeing things are rolling out with the pandemic that was going on, we can see that these states have applied some form of authoritarian control over these states. most, and once again, I'm going to be biased because I live there. New Jersey has very loose control when it comes to executive orders and executive control during an emergency. The governor basically has no checks and balances. Believe me, I've tried. Don't forget, actually have, this is my denial letter. I've tried to apply for a recall, but of course the state declined it due to several different factors, including election dates and having to fund for a special election because those dates were not compliant with a general election. So, once again, the checks and balances for the citizens is one of those things which is not one of high priority and will be protected if and the governor would be protected if the state is able to do so. And we don't even have to talk about the attorney general because that's another story altogether. Now I'm getting sidetracked. So I'm going to get back to the topic at hand, which is the fear of authoritarianism. Well, I think we only have to use one word, or a word with two syllables, to explain exactly what we're looking at. And the word is lockdown. Okay? How many states locked down this year? And what I'm talking about is the complete ceasing of commerce in these states. There are quite a few. And some of them have not completely opened back up. We're not seeing normalcy just yet in many places. In fact, once again, here in New Jersey, we have a 25% occupancy in restaurants, mandatory masks, and also we're dealing with lines. Lots of lines. It reminds me of what they used to talk about when they came to food lines, but thank God we've never come to food lines, though we have had toilet paper lines. And if you ask me, toilet paper lines is far less of a worry than food lines. But it's just but going back to that, it's just how bad are these places? How bad is the control going to get? How much of the civil liberties and constitutional rights are you going to take away before people get fed up? And it seems like they can go pretty far, especially when you're dealing with primarily liberal states. If you're in a much more conservative state, you're not going to see that because they have a far more defensive nature to these things. But when you deal with state control, sure, state can do whatever they need as long as you're dealing with the pandemic. As that's what they say. As long as you're dealing with the pandemic, it's perfectly fine to ban somebody from peacefully assembling, from banning someone to go to church, from banning a person to deal with their own general commerce or going to work, banning a person from going to school, banning a person from personal choice of their health, etc., etc., etc. And so we're seeing this weird and concerning and alien scenario where authoritarianism is going over a lot of these places as a guise, as a form of security. Remember, Ben Franklin did say that any society that would give up a little liberty to gain a little security would deserve neither and lose both, which is exactly what's happening. In order to gain security, they're taking away liberties, and yet we're losing both of them because the state says so. And when people try to stand up, they are shut down. That doesn't mean they're not allowed to rally, but it does mean that they're going to be sharply looked at when it comes to their actions. You're not going to see a protest over in Trenton or in Albany or in Sacramento as readily as you're going to see them in other locations because of the way these states are running things. And it's a very concerning factor, especially when we're dealing with an election coming up. What is this going to do? How exactly is this going to change things when it comes to the election? We've already seen the damage that has been caused by the lockdown in regards to the primaries. If we go to all the different states that have had their mail-in voting for primaries, you could already tell how damaging that was and how unreliable the results were. It's a very big concern that we're going to be dealing with a very similar scenario, if not worst scenario, here in the general election, which is less than 3 weeks away. What's going to happen? Well, we're going to look at a very dangerous scenario where we might not even know the results until after the election, or several weeks or even months after, because of the mail-in ballots. Unless, of course, the election is disqualified. Hopefully they don't get away with this fraud, because we're seeing fraud left and right and center. This is something that has been talked about for months. Prior to these elections even taking place, we were talking about, and I know I have been talking about, and many other people have been talking about, the case of systemic fraud. Election fraud, voter fraud, electioneering, anything to change the result of an election, is being applied. Those chips are on the table. And that is because the establishment that we've come to know and hate is losing. They are losing in a huge, huge way. And this is their last ditch attempt to have some form of normalcy, at least their form of normalcy, in an election. They want to cheat, and they're cheating very hard. And as we can see, fraud is being widely reported to the Board of Elections all over the country. Was this a surprise for many? No. Is this going to be repeated in the future? Well, if people learn from this, they will never do this ever again, and we will be able to go to the polls. But the way I'm looking at it right now, we may actually have to deal with the Supreme Court. And which brings up a very interesting point, right? What about the Supreme Court? Which brings us to our third topic. Wow, this is actually connecting very well. I'm actually surprised how well that's connecting. Joe Biden, okay? Joe Biden, the Democratic candidate for president, refused to answer the question about packing the courts. That showed a lot right there. Excuse me. That showed a lot. That showed a huge response to a lot of things. We were wondering, a lot of us were wondering what was going to happen. But they're not even talking about packing the courts, but they're going to pack the courts. We have people like our good friend Don Lemon, who's talking about we need to change everything. We need to pack the courts. We need to do this and we need to do that. And we even have our good friend Fredo, also known as Chris Cuomo, say that that's a very dangerous thing to do. He said that a few weeks ago. And yet, here they are still suggesting the notion. And the reason why they want to do that is because at this moment, one particular person, but multiple other reasons, but this is probably the big one. And her name is A.C.B. Amy Coney Barrett. And why is Amy Coney Barrett, or should I say with the proper respect, Judge Amy Coney Barrett, why is she such a huge issue? Because she's getting rid of another justice who also had a 3-letter nickname, and that nickname was RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, or the former Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late Justice Ginsburg, which speculations are abound on that one, but still, the reason why is because Justice Ginsburg was a huge proponent of the liberal voice of the Supreme Court. With a Justice Coney Barrett, we're looking at a drastically different Supreme Court. A Supreme Court that may actually be radically different for the next 30 plus years. Just think about that. The 30 plus years of a completely different Supreme Court. At this moment, President Trump, in an assumption, let's do an assumption. In the assumption that that we have a Justice Coney Barrett, the president will have suggested, recommended, and confirmed 3 out of 3. A president who had had a 100% confirmation rating when it comes to Supreme Court justices. That's completely unprecedented. That has never happened. In recent memory, at least. So, remember, President Trump has appointed, and that would be Justice Gorsuch, who replaced the late Justice Scalia. We have Justice Kavanaugh, who replaced the former Justice Anthony Kennedy. And now we would have a potentially presumptive Supreme Court Justice in Amy Coney Barrett, who will be replacing the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And because of this, the Democrat Party and other leftists were suggesting we should pack the courts. And they were saying that's because there's no provision in the Constitution to add seats to the Supreme Court. They want to add, another 3 seats, make it, 11 seats, make it 13 seats, 15 seats, 17 seats, 19 seats, whatever. Doesn't matter. As long as they can add seats. And that shows you how desperate people are. That just shows you the sheer desperation. They don't want to play this game anymore. They're losing. They're like that kid who plays a game and they're losing and they flip over the chessboard because they're in such bad mood. They're in such a bad mood because they know that they're losing. But what's happening later this week? Well, we're going to have the hearings. The hearings will be beginning this week, and we may have a vote on the floor of the Senate by the end of the month, which, my personal opinion, means that we need to do that as soon as possible. And that's because if we do, we will be avoiding potentially another hazardous election. See, if the deep state doesn't get their way with screwing election, they're going to make it so all of us live in a living hell because they did this before. Remember, they did this in 2000, right? They brought it to the Supreme Court with the Bush versus Gore case. Who won that race? Well, that's up for speculation because we have people who say both of them. And this had to go to the Congress to vote. If we actually look at this thing, we know what could potentially happen. What could potentially happen is that the Supreme Court sees this case. And, you know what they could say? They could say, well, in this particular situation, seeing the fraud that is going on, we have no other option but to disqualify the results. They could do that. They could say, well, there's too much fraud. We cannot confirm a result of a winner, and we must, disqualify the results, and must have new elections. This would be devastating to the deep state. It'd also be devastating to everybody else, but it would be far more devastating to the deep state. And the reason why is because they were never planned for a disqualification of an election, especially a general election. Let's just think about that for a second. A disqualification of a general election means that we will not have a government for a period of time besides judges. Besides judges, we will not have a government for a span of potentially 3 months in order for everything to be reorganized so that we can actually have a new election. Let that soak in for a second, because I don't think many people consider that potentially being a result of this. And if that is the result, we could see a brand new government. A brand new government from the ground up with no attachment to the previous one. Besides the things that would be considered holdovers, but there wouldn't be very many. And so that's one of the reasons why they want to pack the court. The reason why they want to pack the court is because they want to win that case. If this case were ever to come to the Supreme Court, when it comes to the election, they want to have enough justices on there that they can completely control how the Constitution is looked at and read at. But who knows? Who knows at this moment? The Speaker is supposed to take over and the results are rejected. I do not believe that is the case, honestly. Let's take a look. Give me a second. I have my tabletop Constitution. Let's see what it says when it comes to a election, right? So, let's see. Vice President succession. I'm just looking at I'm just looking for succession. Don't mind me. This is what I'm looking at, by the way. I'm just reading through my Constitution. Tell me if you see anything, by the way. I don't see anything yet. Actually, let's go back. Oh, too far back. Let's go to the Vice President. Succession 820 to 845. And that would be page 29. So, as I'm going to page 29, let's talk about this. Because I don't think most people understand the concept of succession. At least when it comes to a constitutional crisis. But let's do a little refresher of this prior to actually talking about this and seeing what the Constitution says. At this current moment, due to constitutional amendments, there is a chain of succession. And that has to... And this is usually when a president is incapable of doing their duties as president, whether they're ill, incapacitated, or dead. And usually the line goes like this. It's usually the vice president, the Speaker of the House, and I believe after that it's the Senate pro tempore. So in this case, that would be the... So let's say President Trump is incapacitated for some reason, for an extended period of time, or is killed for some apparent reason, or has resigned. In that case, then you would have Mike Pence. Vice President Pence would take the oath of office and become President Pence. If that case President Pence is incapacitated, then you would have the Speaker of the House. That would be Nancy Pelosi. She'd be sworn in, and she would become President Nancy Pelosi. If she is incapacitated for some reason, then we would go to the Senate pro tempore. And the Senate pro tempore would be Chuck Grassley. Chuck Grassley is the oldest senator in the United States Senate, and I believe he's the longest running senator. And I believe that's what the pro tempore is. It is the longest serving senator in the United States Senate, and that would be Chuck Grassley. Prior to Chuck Grassley, that would be what's his name? Orson. Oh my gosh, I forgot his name. Orson. I don't remember his name. The name escapes me. He retired last cycle. But anyways, let's see what happens. Because now... Alright, found it. Let's go to... Oh, we also that's right. We also had Strom Thurmond for a long time. I think he died in office at 102. Okay, let's see. Section 1 of Amendment 10 of 20. Terms of the President and Vice President shall end at noon on the 20th day of January, and the terms of senator and representatives at noon at the third day of January of these years, and such terms would have ended if this article had not been ratified, and terms of their successors shall begin. Okay, that doesn't really help us with anything except for the fact that a president and vice president are ending. They end on the third day versus the third day. Section 2, Congress shall be assembled at least once a year, and such meeting shall begin at noon on the third day of January, unless they shall be a law appointed a different day. So basically, Congress only needs one day. They could run for one day and no problem. Okay, Section 3. This looks important. If at a time fixed for the beginning of a term of president, and president shall have died, the vice president elect shall become president. Okie dokie. That means, let's say Joe Biden is elected president. That would mean Kamala Harris would become president in this section. If the president shall not have been chosen before the time fixed for the beginning of his term, or the president-elect shall have failed to qualify, then the vice president shall act as president until the president shall have qualified, and the Congress may, by law, provide the case where neither the president nor the vice president-elect shall have qualified, declaring who shall act as president, or the manner in which one who is to act shall be selected, as per 1 person shall act accordingly until the vice president and president shall have qualified. Section 4, let's finish the rest of this amendment. The Congress may, by law, provide for the case of the death of any persons from whom the House of Representatives may choose a president, whenever the right of choice shall have devolved upon them, and for the case of the death of any person whom the Senate may choose a vice president, whenever the right choice shall have devolved upon them. All right. Sections 1 and 2 shall take effect on the 15th of October following the ratification of this article. Section 6, the article shall be inoperative unless it shall be ratified as an amendment of the Constitution by legislators of 3/4 of several states within 7 years of submission. So, that's a mouthful. It changed a lot, okay? Let's remember that this changed a lot. And there's a double asterisk, so let's look at that double asterisk real quickly. Double asterisk. Right on the bottom. Let me let this focused. As you can see, Amendment 20, 2 asterisks. 2 asterisks. The 20th Amendment was ratified on January 23rd, 1933. Who was president in 1933? Franklin Delano was president in 1933. What was happening in 1933? He was running for his third term, if I remember correctly. I believe he was running for his third term. Actually, I don't think so. I think he might have actually been running for his third term. I'm not 100% sure on that, but he was president. And remember, he was president for 4 terms. He didn't succeed his 4th term. He didn't finish his 4th term, but he did get elected for a 4th term. And he was the only president to have 4 terms. 2nd term, correct. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I was thinking it was a 2nd, but I said 3rd. And I think one of the major reasons was, at least when President Roosevelt was in office, was because of the Congress's concern for the health of him. All right. Remember, President Roosevelt had polio, and they were wondering what would be the rule of secession, because we didn't have an established rule of secession prior to that point. And he actually had 4 terms. I know I'll go back to that. That makes that really doesn't do too much. But what are we looking at right now? Okay, let's go back to what was happening. What it's saying basically is that if a president-elect is not able to be inaugurated, then it would be the vice president-elect who would take the place of the president-elect. In this case, let's say Joe Biden wins. Okay, he becomes president-elect. He dies. Kamala Harris becomes president-elect. If that were to happen, that would be a very concerning thing. But let's say, for example, and this may happen, let's say Joe Biden becomes president-elect and he dies. Okay? Now we have Kamala Harris becoming president-elect. Well, guess what? Once again, that would be challenged very hard. That would be challenged very quickly because she does not have the qualifications to become president, let alone vice president. Because she does not have the natural born status. Okay? I know we were talking about that when it came to Obama, but that is doubly so for Kamala Harris. Neither of her parents were American citizens on her birth. Neither of them were citizens. She is, for every other intent, purpose, and lack of other words to use, she was an anchor baby, right? She was an anchor baby because both of her parents were non-citizens living in the United States. She is technically a 14th Amendment citizen and not a natural-born citizen. There's a difference, right? A natural-born citizen is a citizen who is born to American citizens living in the United States. Preferably both of them. But it could be one. But preferably two. You're considered a Fourth Amendment citizen if you are born in the United States. That's it. That is the only qualification, the only necessary prerequisite for being a 14th Amendment citizen. That is it. And that's why there's a lot of arguments about the birther scenario, or with Obama, or Kamala Harris, and even Ted Cruz, even Marco Rubio. Because a lot of them can be questioned of being natural-born citizens. Ted Cruz, born in Canada, not born in the United States. Father was a Canadian. Mother, I believe, was American, but Ted Cruz was not born in America. He would not be considered a natural-born citizen because he was not born in the United States. Period. End of story. End of the conversation. It doesn't matter if he rescinded his Canadian citizenship. He was born in Canada. It's on his birth certificate. I'm sorry, you cannot change that. And we could talk about the Obama scenario, but yeah, Mitt was born in Mexico, and I believe No Name McCain was born on the Panama Canal. That's also a question of where if that's a natural-born citizen. Because if I remember correctly, being a natural-born citizen means that you have to be born in the United States soil proper. Not a territory. You have to actually be born in the United States itself. You could potentially do it at a military base, but that's going to be really pushing it. But those are a lot of the situations that we're dealing with right now. We're dealing with a scenario where they may just try to pack the courts and push things through. It doesn't matter. But what happens if both of them are disqualified? Well, they have to find a way to qualify for those people, because at that point, Congress now chooses who is the president and vice president. They might say, President Pelosi, but who'd be the vice president? Because we need both. Let's go back to the 20th Amendment, right? Because I think it's important that we go back to that real quickly. Let's go back to the 20th Amendment. Alright. One little part I needed to bring up. And that was Section 4. Congress by law provides for case of the death of any persons from whom the House of Representatives may choose a president, whenever the right of choice shall have devolved upon them. For this case of the death of any persons from the Senate may choose a vice president from when the right choice be devolved to them. Long story short, the House president, the Senate chooses the vice president, which makes sense. The Senate may choose the vice president because, if you remember, in a deadlock scenario, if the Senate is tied at 50 senators to 50 senators, the vice president, who is the president of the Senate, breaks the tie. That's what happens. So I think this election is by far more important than I think any election in recent history. And we may see a disqualification of this election due to the rampant fraud. We do not know exactly that the lines that our elected officials and elected officials, judges, and president will go to at this moment, but it is generally recommended to err on the side of extremes at this moment. We're not looking at a standard election. We're looking at an election that was forced and changed and manipulated. And we're seeing we're looking at how states are manipulating election laws in their states to change how ballots are counted, or when are they counted, or the method of which they're being counted or distributed, or any other form of election changing and tampering. Generally, this is a recipe for a, what's that again? Lawsuit. We're looking at lawsuits, ladies and gentlemen, left, right, and center, inside out, upside down, and right side up. Lawsuits are going to be massive. When we're looking at class action lawsuits, we're looking at criminal lawsuits, we're looking at civil lawsuits, we're looking at lawsuits up the wazoo, up until probably who knows when. And we're also looking at a potential change in the citizenry and what they think about things. But because last time I checked, the people don't like when they're disenfranchised, especially when it's overt like this. If it's so overt like this, you think anybody was going to chance doing an election again? I don't know. My state, the Republican statement isn't even allowed on the ballot. That's a question. That's a concern. I don't know. A lot of things are changing, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of things are changing, and changing quickly. We may see a completely different election system. We may see a completely different election system after this. Who knows? But anyways, guys, I'm going to actually sign out for tonight. I want to say thank you to all you guys out there. And hope you guys are safe. Oh, that's Oregon, okay. Oh. That was another state I forgot to mention. I mentioned New York, New Jersey, California. I forgot to mention Oregon, Washington, Illinois, and Michigan. Yeah. Anyways, guys, thank you very much. Be safe out there. Take care. And I'll check in probably Tuesday evening. So until then, have a good one. Good night.